Hello, I'm Graham Dale. For the first time since 1973, when we were inveigled into the so-called common market, the British people were at long last given the opportunity of having their say. And 10 years ago, on the 23rd of June 2016, 33,577,342 of us voted in the Brexit referendum. That's a huge turnout of 72.2% of the electorate. And of those, 51.9%, that's 17,410,742 of us, voted to leave. Brexiteers like me believe passionately in democracy. We genuinely felt that the democratic will of a majority of the British people, expressed in the largest democratic ballot in the nation's history, would be respected and implemented. How wrong and naive we were. Whilst the Vote Leave organisation effectively disbanded itself with a job well done, the Remainers would not accept the democratic decision and vowed to reverse it. For them, democracy is an inconvenience. From the very next day, they began their unrelenting campaign of blatant lies and propaganda to reverse the decision. Their first tactic was to demand a rerun of the referendum through a device disarmingly called a people's vote, vigorously promoted at the time by Keir Starmer and many other politicians now in the Labour government. Contemporaneously, Remainer Prime Minister Theresa May sought to effectively nullify the vote through Brino, a Brexit in name only, by delegating the Brexit negotiations to a Remainer civil servant. The result was an appalling draft withdrawal agreement that would have consigned Britain to being a weak and mute vassal state of the EU, stripped of all semblance of nationhood. The draft agreement was so bad that it failed to gain support even in the Remainer Parliament, where the discredited Remainer Speaker Bercow bent parliamentary procedure and upended convention to aid the Remainer cause. To cut a long and tedious story short, the parliamentary shenanigans became self-defeating, and Brexit was eventually achieved through the election of Boris Johnson's Conservative government in 2019, with a majority sufficient to get Brexit done, albeit with the awful Northern Ireland Protocol, too entrenched to be removed. Having got Brexit over the line, the Conservative government inexplicably and disastrously failed to implement it and take full advantage of its many freedoms and benefits. This incomprehensible failure allowed the Remainiacs to continue their rejectionist campaign, with the result that in recent opinion polls, up to 55% of respondents have expressed a willingness to rejoin. However, this question is asked in isolation, without the wealth of cogent arguments that would be made for staying out. In previous podcasts, I've argued that the assertions that Brexit has had catastrophic economic consequences is demonstrably, factually incorrect. I won't restate them now, but the fact that the Remainiacs are so insistent in regurgitating their falsehoods has to be a deliberate gaslighting of the British people to further their rejoin ambitions. I believe that the rejoiners are fully aware of the true economic facts of Brexit and of the damaging consequences of rejoining the EU. But as their rabid commitment to the EU appears to be purely ideological and not based on empirical evidence, I do not believe they would want to become embroiled in a rejoin referendum, where their arguments would be forensically examined challenged, and quickly destroyed. They know there would be no special re-entry deal for Britain, however much they may hope for it. We will be treated as any other applicant in the queue of 9 nations, mainly from Eastern Europe, all of which will be huge net recipients of EU aid, to be paid for by the EU's richer countries, including, once again, the money tree that is Britain. Our application would need to be approved by all 27 members. Can you imagine the field day that France would have in humiliating us and squeezing us for every conceivable concession? And what about Spain and Gibraltar? The Spanish would no doubt want to finally complete their formal takeover of our sovereign territory now that they have de facto control. And don't forget the Republic of Ireland and their covetous eyes on the north. What price would they exact? And what about Cyprus and our sovereign military bases? It goes on. Every chancellor and opportunist will want to take a bite out of the dripping roast that's Britain, however spurious their claims. The international humiliation of Britain grovelling before the smug, self-righteous Eurocrats and politicians such as Macron would be too dire to contemplate. The opt-outs we previously received, such as exemptions from the Euro and Schengen, would not be available. The annual Thatcher rebate of about £5 billion would not be renewed. We will once again surrender our national sovereignty to the Brussels bureaucrats and the European Court of Justice, with the concomitant loss of our fundamental rights to democratic independence and self-determination. Our Rejoiner membership fee would be at least £20 billion per annum, and rising to at least £23 billion when the 9 poorer countries become members. The loss of the pound and forced adoption of the euro would mean surrendering our essential independent control of our monetary policy to the European Central Bank. We will become committed to a potential £100 billion of ECB contingent loan guarantees. We would be forced into the compulsory inclusion of the EU's new migrant dispersal policy to share out immigrants to individual members every 6 months. We will be obliged to join Schengen, the open borders agreement, and once again accept uncontrolled inter-EU freedom of movement. In rejoining, we would have to commit to the EU's ultimate objective of ever closer union, leading ineluctably to a United States of Europe, where monetary policy, fiscal policy, defense, international relations, and rules and regulations affecting every aspect of democratic life, in fact, any policy of significance, will be controlled centrally by Brussels bureaucrats. The British Mother of Parliaments would effectively become a glorified parish council. There are many more negatives to rejoining. So much so that I feel the rejoiners would run scared of a rejoin referendum. Much easier for a Labour-led Rejoiner government to continue their shameless duplicity of rejoining by stealth and deception. They could try to legitimize this through a manifesto commitment to rejoin the EU, but without a commitment to hold a rejoin referendum. If elected, they could claim that their manifesto commitment is good enough for a continuation and intensification of the EU resets. That would include the customs union, the single market, Schengen, and many other membership commitments. Having been presented with a fait accompli, the British people would be told that, well, we may as well formally rejoin. It's just a short, logical, sensible step to regularise the situation, and without the need, of course, for a superfluous referendum. Labour has already demonstrated its contempt for democracy through its deceit and duplicity in government. Why would they stop if their holy grail of formally rejoining the EU is so tantalisingly within their grasp? Thank you for listening.